As the US dictates the terms of post-war governance, Gaza remains in ruins. An Israeli politician who's called for an end to Israel's genocide insists that justice for Palestinians is the only way to peace.
There won't be peace without justice. And justice requires the liberation of the Palestinian people from the vicious, deadly occupation.
And we hear from a Palestinian activist who says there needs to be new leadership and a new strategy.
Our leadership has been in a deep sleep for too long. They did not create any mechanism, any productive diplomacy.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rida Fakhri. When US President Donald Trump appeared at a summit in Sharm el-Sheikh on the 13th of October, he boasted that he delivered a peace plan for the Middle East. But for all the handshakes and photo ops, Israel's position remains clear. It will continue to maintain its military occupation in Gaza. Now, even as Palestinian and Israeli hostages were being released, the reality was sinking in. Within hours of agreeing to a ceasefire, Israeli forces opened fire on Palestinians in Gaza City, killing civilians. So is this a genuine path to peace or a guarantee for more violence? Just before President Trump went to Egypt, he addressed the Israeli Knesset. His speech was briefly interrupted by two Knesset members who held up signs that read "Recognize Palestine" and chanted slogans denouncing Israel's genocide. Both lawmakers were immediately removed. One of them is Ofer Cassif from the Democratic Front for Peace and Equality, or Hadash Party. He joins us now. Ofer Cassif, after you were thrown out of the Israeli Knesset, you called it twisted to praise Donald Trump or call him a savior when you say he has been complicit in the genocide of Gaza. But today, when you look at his so-called peace plan, how would you describe it? Does it deserve any praise?
No, absolutely not. This celebration full of megalomania and flattery in the Knesset was shameful and grotesque and pathetic. First and foremost, because of the two protagonists, as it were, who are themselves megalomaniacs, but also because of the background. Let's not forget that an agreement was on the table before last March. And the agreement was very clear. It could stop the genocide in Gaza and save thousands and thousands of lives. And it could also set free the Israeli hostages who were tortured and were in agony there for 2 years. And they were sacrificed by the Israeli government only in order to survive as a government. The motivation of Netanyahu has always been his own well-being only.
What is his motivation, do you think, for agreeing to this plan now? Was it done in good faith, or was it simply an attempt to rehabilitate his image?
First of all, Netanyahu was always interested about his own good, as I said, and the main thing that drives him in the last few years, ever since his trial began or the investigations began, the only thing that drives him is his own, freedom, that is to say, staying out of prison. And he's ready to sacrifice the whole world for that matter, for that end, including not only thousands of Palestinians, but also Israelis, including soldiers and the hostages. Why do you think that for 2 years he failed time and time again, as everybody knows, including the majority of the families of the victims and the hostages? They know that he failed the possibility of deals and agreements in the past in order to stay in power, because he knew that once he agreed to stop the genocide and in order to release the hostages, he was going to lose his coalition, and his government was about to fail, and then he could find himself very fast behind bars. That was his only motivation. And alas, Trump is not a savior, because when he was a president in March and the previous agreement was violated and breached by the Israeli side at the expense of those hostages, let alone the Palestinians, Trump supported him.
How would you describe the agreement, if not a peace plan?
This is not a peace plan for two main reasons. In order to reach peace, first and foremost, those who are part to the conflict or to the tension or war, whatever you like to call it, all the parties should be engaged in a dialogue. But let's not forget that the first time that Trump publicly and officially presented the proposal, I prefer to call it a proposal or idea rather than a plan, it was with Netanyahu after Abu Mazen, the Palestinian president, and other delegates from Palestine were not allowed to enter the United States, the United Nations. Their visas were revoked by the very same Trump. So first of all, how can we speak about a peace plan if one of the major actors in this issue is missing and actually is excluded? Secondly, everybody knows for ages that the only way to reach peace is justice. There won't be peace without justice. And justice requires the liberation of the Palestinian people from the vicious, deadly occupation. That is to say, a total withdrawal of Israel, including dismantling the settlements in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip. Everybody knows that. That's the only formula to reach a just peace. A Palestinian statehood in the territories Israel occupied in 1967. As long as Trump doesn't recognize that and doesn't move towards that, doesn't do anything to move towards that, and sometimes even does the opposite, we cannot refer to it as a peace plan.
But how important is it for the Israeli public itself to support justice and dignity and basic rights of self-determination, eventually the recognition of a Palestinian state, for there to be proper peace between the two peoples?
Justice is required in order to achieve a stable solution. So in that sense, it's not only morally compelling, it is also on the interest of the Israelis and the state of Israel. It is our interest as Israelis, on top of being just, to accept and to forward, to pursue the solution of the two states, the solution of Palestinian liberation in the independence. It is not only just, it is not only the interest of the Palestinian people, it is also the interest of the Israeli people.
But that's not how the majority of Israelis see it, let's be honest. I mean, a recent poll conducted by Penn State University found that 82% of Jewish Israelis support expelling Palestinians from Gaza, and 56% back the expulsion of Arab citizens of Israel. This plan calls for the de-radicalization of Gaza. But after a 2-year Israeli genocide, and with the rise of the far right in Israel and the open calls for ethnic cleansing that are supported by a vast majority of Israelis, should Israel itself be de-radicalized?
Public opinion is very dynamic. It changes rapidly. It's not a theoretical issue. It is an historical issue. You know, on the eve of the Oslo Accords, no matter what I think about those accords, but on the eve of the Oslo Accords, during the first Intifada, which a great part of it I spent in prison for refusing to serve in the Palestinian occupied territories, the vast majority of the Israeli people opposed the idea of two states. Once the Oslo Accords went public, you could see in literally a couple of days how the public opinion totally shifted 180 degrees, and the vast majority endorsed the Oslo Accords and the idea of the two-state solution and Palestinian liberation, including the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Literally a few days after they were considered as terrorists, should be, persecuted. And same about the Palestinians. You could see in Gaza, this is very ironic and very sad. In Gaza, once the Oslo Accords again came to their knowledge, the people of Gaza, they took to the streets and gave olive branches to the Israeli soldiers and candies. Same in the West Bank. So I truly believe that once there is a prospect for peace, which is based, as I said, on the two-state solution and Palestinian liberation and statehood, I'm sure that the majority of the Israelis as well as the Palestinians will embrace that.
But hold on,
Do you
believe that today the majority of Israelis are becoming increasingly radicalized and they are increasingly against a two-state solution?
Unfortunately, yes, but again, because it seems to be something which is totally unrealistic. The problem is not the public opinion, neither in Israel nor in Palestine or in anywhere else. The main problem is that we lack opposition, because those who are supposed to be the leaders of the opposition in Israel are either themselves fascists or cowards or authentically rightists themselves.
So then is there a genuine partner for peace on the Israeli side?
There must be. First of all, that's our job. That's our work as a real opposition in Israel. That's exactly what we've been doing, to some extent successfully. I do not pretend to be the majority. We are far from that. But I must tell you something very interesting. In the beginning of the genocide, when we went to the streets, and we went with others to demonstrate against the continuation of the massacre, and also to calling to release the hostages and to object the government. We were a tiny minority, sometimes persecuted, even beaten by co-demonstrators, because the majority of the demonstrators demonstrated because of the fate of the hostages and soldiers, and didn't care much, to say the least, about the Palestinians. Of course, we did, to all of them. So we were quite marginalized. As time went by, and especially since Israel breached the agreement in March, you could see a huge shift. We became thousands across the country.
You've described it yourself as an anti-Zionist. You say you object to the ideology and practice of Zionism, calling it a racist ideology which espouses Jewish supremacy. We often hear Israel described as the only democracy in the Middle East. As a Jewish Israeli member of the Knesset, how accurate, how misleading is this?
Israel was never a democracy. It was born as an ethnocracy. That is to say, a state in which there are democratic elements and some democratic rules of the game, but there is a supremacy, a Jewish supremacy, which is institutionalized constitutionally, although Israel doesn't have a constitution officially. So obviously, as an anti-Zionist in a non-Zionist movement, I support equality, and I think that cannot come with Zionist hegemony. And that's part of our struggle to democratize Israel, not to destroy Israel, not to eliminate Israel. We say that Israel has the right to exist in peace and security like any other sovereign state, but it must be democratized, and it must be based on justice and equality and liberty.
But can Zionism coexist with justice, peace, and dignity for Palestinians?
Not all Zionists are the same. And our role is to convince those who see themselves as liberal Zionists and even leftist Zionists, our role is to convince them that they live in an illusion, that they contradict themselves, that they ignore the fact that they live the lives of a cognitive dissonance. That's our role.
Just looking ahead, how optimistic are you that we will see significant shifts within the Israeli society and leadership?
So on the one hand, I am pessimistic intellectually. That is to say, I understand that we may go even deeper into the abyss, and the situation may be much worse, and we must be prepared for that, including deadly violence within Israel, to the extent of a civil war. That's realistic. On the other hand, I must believe, and I do, that thanks to our struggle, thanks to the fact that we do not surrender, we may bring a change to good. And we keep our struggle in order to achieve that. And I assure you that with all the problems and the prices Me and my friends are paying. We shall never surrender. We continue our struggle.
Ofer Cassif, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the Trump plan for Gaza may be unusually vague, but one thing is made explicitly clear. Hamas and other armed factions will, quote, not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. Instead, a so-called Board of Peace, headed by Donald Trump, will oversee the political process. Samer Sinijlawi, a Palestinian political activist with the Fatah party and president of the Jerusalem Development Fund, recently wrote, quote, President Trump's 20-point plan has begun to deliver what many thought impossible. The path ahead is uncertain, but there is hope. He joins us now. Samer Sinjlawi, you have expressed hope and optimism about the Trump so-called peace agreement for Gaza, even though the ceasefire was violated almost as soon as it was agreed. How useful, how promising was it to have a ceasefire agreement that did not include the Palestinians and which they did not sign up to?
Well, at least let's recognize that this initiative brought an end to the war, a war that was costing the Gazans 150 lives a day, including 35 kids. A classroom of kids was losing their lives every day in Gaza. So this unimaginable level of suffer and human losses has stopped. Now, would I call it a peace plan? I think it's too early. It is maybe a hope towards a peace plan. We still need to know how this is going to develop in the coming phases. I'm sure that President Trump has a lot of leverage, but I think maybe it has reached to the maximum impact on the current Israeli coalition. The challenge is how can we convince 51% of the Israelis in any election to vote towards the option of two-state solution. And I think it's possible.
How do you do that after a 2-year genocide when a majority of Israelis did not oppose Netanyahu's destruction of Gaza? In fact, a recent poll from Hebrew University taken in mid-August found that 76% of Jewish Israelis either fully or partially agreed with the notion that there are no innocent people in Gaza. This is the kind of Israeli society that you are dealing with today.
It is lack of leadership. Now, I was listening to the remarks and speeches of the different Israeli leaders when Trump was in the Knesset. I did not expect much from the president of the Knesset. I did not expect much from the Prime Minister of Israel. But when the leader of the opposition, Lapid, came to stage, I was waiting for him to say something in a half word about the Palestinian suffer in Gaza. But nothing. Nothing was mentioned about the level of suffer and damage. 25,000 kids were killed in Gaza. And still even the leader of the opposition, who is coming from a different political background, couldn't find the courage to say, I need to recognize the suffer on the other side. Nothing came out of the mouth of any of the Israeli leaders, including Mr. Lapid.
What does it tell you about the challenges that you will face when the majority of the Israeli public feels this way?
If they are sincere in bringing peace into the Middle East, they need to focus, in addition to the reconstruction, they need to focus on reconciliation. Peace is not only built with cement and steel. Peace should be built inside the hearts of Palestinians and Israelis, the hearts that are filled with hard feelings. There is something in common between the Israelis and Palestinians these days, that our hearts are filled with a cocktail of feelings. It's pain, it's hatred, it's revenge. These feelings are controlling us, and somebody needs to deal with it. So we need investment in peace parallel to reconstruction.
Can peace be dictated from abroad? Because there seems to be a diktat through the United States, the United Kingdom, and other major players, where they are essentially picking your leaders for you It sounds like colonial governance. There is no self-determination or even the notion of a Palestinian state at the end of the road.
Gaza needs to be governed by Gazans, needs to be governed by Palestinians. Any solution needs to come from the ground. We, the Palestinians, we need to be aware of taking the responsibility in trying to convince the Israelis. We need to find a way in touching their hearts and their minds, because we can continue talking to the world, but not talking to the Israelis. We might reach to 190 countries recognizing the state of Palestine. If Israel is not one of them, it will not help us. The only state that we need to convince to recognize the state of Palestine is the state of Israel, because it's the state that can deliver this sovereignty to Palestinians.
But as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing government have made clear that they will not accept a Palestinian state.
This tells us, again, that we need to look out for solutions internally. The Palestinians need to have a change in leadership. And the only way I see it happening is through elections. In the last 100 years, we have been led by three people in our history: Haj Amin Husseini, Yasser Arafat, and Mahmoud Abbas. And trust me, none of them has been able to achieve a little bit of the aspirations of our people, because none of them has been in a system that brings him to accountability, that forces him to transparency. We were always looking at the leader as a savior, as a godfather that we all follow and trust. Now the trend among the Palestinians is trying to build up a system, a democratic system, a transparent, a democratic system even at the top of the pyramid. This is now the movement, especially after what we have seen in Gaza. Our leadership has been in a deep sleep for too long. They did not create any mechanism, any dynamics, any productive diplomacy. Anything that you have seen on the diplomatic stage, including the wave, the tsunami of recognition of the Palestinian state, that did not come as a result of a Palestinian diplomacy. It came as a result of the hard footage that is coming out of Gaza.
But did the status quo benefit Israel and the United States and whoever argued for many years that there was no Palestinian partner? Because Mahmoud Abbas was elected in 2005, his term in office ended in 2009, and yet there he is at 90 years old. Do you feel that there is another unifying figure, like Marwan Barghouti, who is still being held in an Israeli jail?
I think we have contributed with a lot of harm to Marwan Barghouti. The campaign that we have launched, putting him in the level of being the Palestinian Mandela, it has put a lot of attention on him. It created this kind of symbolism that the Israelis wanted to defeat. We have, in a way, without willing, created the atmosphere that made the release of Marwan almost impossible. I don't think we need a Palestinian Mandela. We need a system. We need a democratic system. Everybody now is saying that the Palestinian state should be demilitarized. They focus on one D. I think it should be 4 Ds. The Palestinian state should be demilitarized, de-radicalized, democratic, and developed. If we miss one of these pillars, this Palestinian state will not be sustainable.
Many Palestinians would disagree with you, saying that it is Palestinian society that needs to be de-radicalized. And in fact, a large majority, 85% of Palestinians in the West Bank and 64% in Gaza, opposed disarming Hamas to stop this war. This was in the poll that was conducted by the Palestinian Center for Research in May. Only 18% supported disarming Hamas.
Well, yes, of course, the Israelis need a similar process of de-radicalization. But I'm here focusing on the Palestinian internal issue. And we might be able to realize that it will not serve us if we now leave ourselves into levels of anger and revenge and focus on how to react towards the injustice that has happened to our people in Gaza. I think the best way that could serve all those victims who have been losing their lives in 2 years in Gaza is by trying to have a cool mind, in thinking about a better future for the others than maybe taking revenge. This kind of process is very important for us as Palestinians. We need to heal our wounds very quickly. Also, the Israelis, they need to stop, reflecting the image of being traumatized. They have got back their hostages. I think they should close that page, and they also should start looking into the future. So there was some mistakes committed on the way. I think now we learned a lot from it, and we are more ready to seize a coming opportunity.
Samer Sinjlawi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, while some Palestinians see an opportunity for change in Trump's Gaza plan, others, including some in Israel, warn that it will entrench the occupation. In Egypt, away from Gaza's ruins, many of the world's leaders gathered to applaud themselves and declare a new beginning. But without an end to Israel's military presence in Gaza, and without justice for Palestinians, it's hard to imagine what kind of new beginning. Unless Palestinians are treated as a people with fundamental rights, allowed to determine their own future and govern themselves, this plan could end up going nowhere, like so many before it. That's all from me, Rida Fakhri, and the team. Thanks for watching.